Welcome back to our 5G series podcast, Conversation from the Front. This is part two of our podcast series, and today we are going to have conversation around network analytics, setting the stage for innovation. To all our listeners, in case you missed the part one, then please follow the link below in the description. I'd like to welcome back Graham and Suresh to this discussion. Gentlemen, it's a pleasure to have you again. In the part one of the series, we covered about the various challenges and opportunities that we see in the network analytics landscape. Just to summarize, Graham, you shared key insights around the evolution of network analytics as the technology moved from 2G to 5G. You also touched base upon the challenges that CSPs are facing around complexities, covered various key points around data volume, launching new services, impact on customer experience, engineering, tools, and all that. And Suresh, you brought in a unique perspective on how artificial intelligence and machine learning can help CSPs solve these challenges. We discussed in detail about various applications of machine learning, how it can help us achieve zero-touch network analytics in the network planning, optimization, and operations space. We touched, some of the key aspects of predictive analytics and how some of the use cases around what if simulations, forecasting can really help a very, very accurate network decision makings, right? So I would like to move the conversation ahead and take this opportunity to get into the practical aspects of network analytics and 5G. And Graham, I would like to welcome you and would start with you, knowing the fact that you have led multiple network transformations in the industry. Would you like to share with our listeners about the transformation that you see would be required in 5G era from tools and products perspective that will be used by the network team? Along with that, it will be great to hear from you that the existing tools, are those going to suffice the 5G requirement? So Graham, would like to hear on these two fronts, specifically on tools and products.
Yes, it's quite an interesting inflection point for the industry right now, and particularly for operators. So I think going from 2G to 3G to 4G, really most of the tools have just evolved or stayed the same over that time. But moving to 5G, I think there's a complete inflection point which requires a rethink about the tools, because not only is the radio technology changing with 5G and bringing with it the changes in traffic and changes in services, but also that has a ripple effect throughout the network. So I think there needs to be a transformation of the transmission and transport networks to meet these high volumes and build a scalable architecture. You need to rethink your core networks and how you manage those in a 5G era, particularly to take advantage of things like network virtualization, software-defined networking, and of course, as Suresh mentioned on the first call, that actually there's a whole world of public cloud services out there now, and how you adopt some of those is also going to change. So I think you can no longer, as an operator, think about, I've got my existing ways of working, my existing tool sets, and I'm going to just evolve those to meet 5G. I think you need to think quite differently. So my challenge would be, if you were a new entrant coming in at 5G, what would you build? And you certainly wouldn't build any of the systems that you've evolved through 2G, 3G, and 4G. So I think now is an opportunity to have a complete step change. What I would say is a true transformation in order to set yourselves up to manage the complexity of these new networks in a way that means that you can do it with a reasonably small engineering capability who are focused on making the key critical decisions. In order for that to happen, they need to have a tool set that does a lot of the hard work of doing the analytics, and providing the visualization, and certainly giving you that overall view of the customer experience versus the network performance, and not down at the element level. So I think it's now a virtual world, and you need to think about the services and the customers much more than the individual elements. So I think quite a sea change required from an operational point of view, because quite frankly, the historical ways of doing things won't scale to meet 5G, and are cost prohibitive. So it requires a rethink. And actually, I think the good thing is there's an opportunity to save costs by rationalization. So do you really need 3G anymore? Probably not. You're going to phase that out. Possibly the same for 2G as well. But it's also an opportunity to retire a lot of your once fit for purpose tools, and actually think about things of, actually, I need now an aggregated end-to-end view. I can't rely on individual elements within individual parts of the network.
Very interesting point. I like the word sea change, and Suresh, my follow-up question would be to you. I mean, when I see this transformation happening, I also see, because this question was more around tools and products, I see the transformation happening from products to platforms, right? Whatever it be, let's assume that there is a new offering from various software vendors. In 5G era, it will be tested, right? Can you let us, our listener, know that what will be those new aspects on which these new tools, platforms will be tested heavily in 5G era, Suresh?
Sure. I think Graham alluded to the evolution that's happening in the network space itself, right? So if you were to take a pause and look at what are the building blocks of 5G network, right? You will see it includes the new radio spec, of course. There's a network slicing. There's an aspect of multi-access edge computing, right? The SDNs, which for separating controller and user planes. There is NFVs for decoupling hardware and software, and of course, a flexible NG core, right? So the evolution, I think, from a 4G to 5G, I think is transformational in nature, right? And hence, I think the tools and the platforms, which were used in 4G, I think also need to evolve and become probably a lot more cloud native. Need to be microservices based, need to be containerized applications that become easy to integrate and upgrade, seamlessly improving the innovation cycles, right? So, I mean, as Graham pointed out, that when you're putting together a 5G network, you don't put it the way the traditional sense, right? You probably have a lot more newer tools and platforms and technologies available to really make a transformational journey in that, right? So there are two things that stand out in this entire 5G architecture for me, right? Which are very relevant for enterprises, right? If I want to focus on enterprise for a moment, where low latency and high reliability become very critical, I look at edge computing and network slicing as two critical pieces of this architecture that we need to be focusing on. Why is MEC an exciting piece of technology, right? Given the promise of 5G, which is, of course, low latency, high bandwidth, and a huge number of devices or capacity, right? MEC with 5G creates tremendous opportunities in every industry. It brings computation and data storage closer to where data is generated, enabling better data control, of course, with reduced costs and faster insights and actions, and leading to continuous operations, right? The other one is network slicing. And network slicing has a potential to revamp the legacy mode of the best effort networks to offer far more consistent customer experience and improvement in time to market for new services, especially in the enterprise segment. As Graham again pointed out at the beginning of the conversation, I mean, you get your slice and you define how it's going to look like, how it's going to be characterized, right? That's the beauty of the new 5G network. So an end-to-end network slicing enables new business models and use cases across business verticals and creates new revenue opportunities for CSPs, right? And by efficient use and management of network resources in a slice, operators can definitely provide differential services and maximize ROIs.
Suresh, I think you brought up another critical point: new revenue stream for CSPs. Graham, question to you. This transformation will have its own cost, right? How do you see this change in network analytics and 5G space will help CSPs monetize these new use cases that 5G promises to be? How do you see that happening, Graham? And how you see network analytics be that enabler for CSPs?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the big challenges. Like, it's always difficult for operators to drive new customer bases and drive new revenue streams, and keep ahead of the investment curve that you're making to invest in things like 5G. So I think, where I would always start is looking at the customer and saying, what is it the customer needs, and what would the customer value as a service from an operator? And a couple of things would spring to mind. If I'm an enterprise, I certainly want reliability. I'm used to traditional fixed data networks providing my connectivity. I think mobile adds a new dimension to that. But again, there's a benchmark expectation of reliability. So operators have to be able to meet the specific needs of that operator, of that customer. And I think COVID's been in a good example of actually how, with all distributed workforce, how enterprises have become much more conscious of the need for reliability and that connectivity. So I think mobile got a great opportunity to play a big role here, but they need to make sure they meet the needs of the customers. So reliability, absolutely key. Second, and it's always important, is making sure that you have a very cost-effective network, because you're competing against other operators and fixed line as well as mobile, and keeping your cost low but your service performance high is an ongoing challenge. So I think this is where you really need to look at the specific details of how your network's performing. So typically an operator manages on averages. So what is the average data usage per customer? What's the average performance? I think when you get down to individual customers and individual enterprises, you need to be very specific about those use cases where things aren't working. And that's really like trying to find a needle in a haystack. How do you pinpoint those critical things that need to be fixed or changed in order to deliver a great service performance on a per customer basis? Really hard to do, because there's such a, as I think I said in the previous podcast, that there's such a volume of data. How do you drill down to focusing on the things that really matter, rather than get swamped by all this data and managed by averages, which never gives you a great experience. So I think, bringing it back to your original question, if I was a customer, I'd be interested in cost-effective service, a reliable service that meets my service needs. And as an operator, that's what you need to be able to deliver in order to drive your customer base and your revenues.
So, Graham, a follow-up question on that. You covered good insight about service needs, cost-effective service launch and all. How do you see customer experience getting changed, Graham? Will the need will change from a consumer perspective or enterprise perspective, Graham?
Well, it will, because, if you look at the evolution of 2G to 3G to 4G, what you've actually seen is an evolution of mobile broadband. So you've seen speeds increase, bandwidths increase, but fundamentally nothing else has changed. So yes, there's been a great deal of new services that are out in the internet world that make use of these larger bearers and faster bearers. But what you're getting with 5G is you're starting to get some low latency services, because there's now a sort of ultra low latency capability in 5G. So you're starting to get things like network slicing, an ability to differentiate quality of service, because it's been a best effort service for everybody in 2G, 3G, well, maybe not so much 2G, but certainly 3G and 4G. And whereas 5G, you're starting to get differentiated quality of service. So that's quite a big change. So, there are things happening with 5G that are quite unique. It isn't just about the evolution of mobile broadband. It is about these, massive number of devices with IoT, and it's about low latency.
Very valid point. And I think that is going to promise that the enterprise and the subscribers move from a normal experience to an immersive experience. Would you agree on that?
Yes, I think so. I mean, clearly the applications are changing, and the sort of things you can do these days that you are just amazing compared to 5 years ago. So and how how you support that immersive experience is absolutely critical. Because one thing you can be sure of is that a customer has pretty low tolerance for getting a poor performance of their new experience. And if you want to manage and have very low churn, which is absolutely critical for being an effective operator, then you need to really understand on an individual customer basis what is happening, what is their expectation versus the reality of what they're experiencing.
In fact, this is no more a secret. I think we all will agree that it's eventually the customer experience which drives the business. And I think it's getting interesting. And I'd like to just quote one point which should take us to our next set of discussion, which is around if we have to monetize 5G, it has to be around experience, and that experience has to move and become more immersive in nature. Suresh, my next question to you, in the real world, I know you have been involved in so many strategic initiatives to measure such experience and eventually let CSPs know how good or exceptional the experience is, right? Can you share with our listeners some of the real world examples centered around these key technologies that we discussed, centered around these monetization aspect which Graham covered? It'll be really great for our listeners to hear that from you.
Absolutely, Alok. I think it's a great segue because see, the promise of 5G with enhanced mobile broadband or high bandwidth, low latency, high reliability, and high capacity, right? I think comes together, in a fashion that will enable, a number of novel use cases that we've never seen before, right? And if you combine that to what you're saying as ultimately the customer experience is what determines your business reality, which is so true, right? And so does these elements that come together to put a 5G network enable us to take some of those bets, some of those innovative use cases, right? So there is one use case that I wanted to kind of bring to this discussion. We've been working with TM Forum as part of the Catalyst program. We're working with other partners to help put this together, right? So this is a use case, is about smart stadiums, 5G enabled smart stadiums to drive extreme fan engagement in a smart stadium, right? For delivering end of the day a very unforgettable fan experience, right? So what does it involve? So this essentially involves a very hyper personalized services to the folks who are attending a sports event in a smart stadium, right? And providing them curated content in real time, right? It will also provide, very interestingly, the use case that I think we're working together. It also provides an on-demand access to drone cameras, for example, for a multi-angle, interactive, on-field experience powered by AR/VR, right? And this is possible today with 5G networks, right? So with low latency, all kinds of user behavior comes into play. For example, we're looking at the user behaviors of buying content or interacting with application or sharing content or experiences or replaying an aspect of the experience that they just had can be predicted and facilitated through numerous touch points, right? And the 5G stadium will unearth for us, I think, a new monetization opportunities, which could include, for example, pushing a merchandise sales or selecting player data during pre-game or in-game or post-game scenarios, and using that very creatively in terms of engaging with the viewers and the devices in a longer term.
I mean, that sounds pretty promising, Suresh, and quite cool. And for our listeners, these use cases are going to be, these are not possible probably on a non-standalone 5G environment. These are all, I assume, going to be a standalone 5G environment,
yeah.
Right, Suresh?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, this was a fantastic conversation, and this takes me towards the end of this discussion. It was for me personally an absolute pleasure to speak to you, and I'm sure our listeners, yeah, have taken a lot of valuable insights from this conversation. So, Suresh and Graham, thanks for your valuable time.
Great. Thanks, guys, and thanks for inviting me along. Been a really good topic, really good, interesting conversation. Lots of food for thought for the operators out there.
Yes, thanks, Alok. Thanks, Graham, and thanks, listeners. I think just one leaving note. As 5G networks proliferate, I think there's definitely a need to move from the traditional network analytics to a much smarter network intelligence and maybe automated decision making to enable a truly futuristic, experience for customers.
Pleasure to have you on the board today. And for me, like I said, a true honor to host two of the eminent leaders in the telecom industry. I'd also like to thank our listeners for tuning into the session today, specifically to the part two. And like I said in the beginning, if you have missed part one, the link is there in the description. And of course, we at Subex have been doing a lot of innovative stuffs and a lot of things in the store, specifically on the TM Forum Catalyst, which Suresh spoke about briefly. So until we meet next time, stay tuned and stay safe. I, Alok from Subex, would like to sign off. And I wish you all a great day ahead. Thank you, everyone.